Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope all of you all can hear me. So, I think the 10 questions are in ascending order of difficulty, right? So, I know the easy questions are going to be quick kills, but I will still, with those easy questions, try to build some sort of structure or I'll give you some sort of guideline that will help you on the harder levels of questions as well. All right. So I'm going to look at your comments on my mobile as well. I'll be shifting between screens. Simple rule of thumb: wait for me to explain. I will explain the entire question. I'll try to be as in depth as possible. If I don't cater to your doubt, right, at any given point of time, I will give you maybe a minute or two in the end to type in your query in the chat window. All right. So let's start. All right, question one. Now, the entire topic is based on word problems and sets, right? They are somewhat interrelated because the skill sets that you require for a word problem also carries forward in terms of sets, right? Because you'll have to read the question, you'll have to process the question very well. So, simple rule of thumb, okay? In today's session, whichever question we work, whether it's a set question or a word problem, let's focus on the reading of the question. Let's read it slowly, understand every aspect, and break it down. So, for everyone there who found it very hard or time consuming to work, there would be two reasons why you did that. One, because you rushed through the reading in the first phase, you missed out certain pieces of information, you didn't get to an answer that matched the answer choices. Then you had to revisit the question again and read it all over again. So it took you time. And the second, you would have approached the question in the not so efficient way of working. You would have introduced too many variables. You would have worked with the question in a very haphazard way. So it became very difficult for you to connect all the pieces together. So you would have taken time. I may sound a little weird here, but in order to get faster on a word problem, it is very important for you to slow down in the beginning. I know it's a very weird statement I'm making, but trust me, this is the way. You always, to get faster at a question and more accurate at a question on a word problem, you slow down in the question. Now, when you read this question here, I'm going to show you how exactly I would read, what I would ask myself in my head, and how would I process the question. If 75% of a class answered the first question on a certain test correctly, 55% answered the second question on the test correctly. So in my mind, I'm creating a visual picture that I have a first question, I have some data on how people have answered the first question, I have a second question, I have data on how people have answered the second, and 20% answered neither of the questions correctly. So they're giving me a neither scenario. So they're giving me data of one piece of information, they're giving me data of another, and they're giving me data of neither. That means there should be data of both as well, correct? And the question is asking me that what percent answered both correctly? So immediately when you see a question of this format, where you have a neither region, you have both regions, you know you can either use a 2x2 matrix, a table, or you can use a Venn diagram. How do I make a differentiation between where to use the table and where to use the diagram, the Venn diagram? To be very truthful, when you have two quantities like this, right, you're free to use either a table, you're free to use the Venn diagram. Any one would work. I'm more partial towards the Venn because the Venn is more visual in nature, right? So quickly, if y'all can type in the chat window, how many of y'all went with the Venn diagram process of working on this question? And how many of y'all went by solving it using a table? Right? If you can quickly type so that I get a sense of things, I will, if I see some of you all have used a table, I will solve it with the table as well. If most of you all have used a Venn, I would go with a when as well. Okay, so it is a mixed bag. So let's discuss both. So first rule of thumb, when you have a database question like this, decide on whether to choose a when or a table. How do you make that decision? If you're dealing with data of two quantities, you can either go with a when or go with a table. Any one would work. But if you're dealing with three quantities, it's always better to go with a when. If you're dealing with four quantities, you can still go with the when, but it's always better at that point to go with the table. 2 cross 2, right? 2 cross 2 is four quantities. So for those of you all who used a when, right? A Venn diagram requires you to put the data into the regions they belong. So I have the first question, I have the second question. I have to, in my Venn diagram, read the question and put in information into the correct regions they belong. And the simple rule of a Venn is, if you're filling up a Venn, always start inside out, right? Fill the intersection and go backwards. If the intersection is not given to you, absolutely fine. You can assign it with a variable and go backwards. What I see normally people doing with a Venn diagram is they put an A, B, C, D, and then they start creating equations out of it. Okay, my personal opinion on that is, I mean, if you're making the equation, you're making the question very algebraic in nature, then you're not using the advantage that the Venn gives you. The advantage the Venn gives you is it gives you the advantage of visualizing the question, looking at the regions and working with that regions. So if I was putting in the data here, 75% of a class answered the first question correctly. So let's say this circle represents the people who answered the first question correctly. So this entire circle would be 75%. See how I'm reading the question. I'm not directly trying to dive into the data that gives me the intersection. I'm working my way through the question. 55% answered the second question correctly. So this is 55%. And 20% answered neither of the questions correctly. So the outer region should be 20%. What percent answered both correctly? So I need this to be X. Now, for those who went the route of a Venn, most of y'all, normally when you work with Venn diagrams for some weird reason, will stick to a couple of formulae. Okay. And that's the reason why towards the end, I gave some harder questions where the formula would not come in too handy on solving, or it would be slightly problematic towards working. But let's in this session, right, let's keep aside the formula, because I don't want to make the session formulaic in nature. I want to make it more understanding in nature, because the Venn requires visualization. The Venn can be broken down into algebra. So one way of working with a Venn would be a process to finish the Venn. Guys, please be patient with me. I'm putting in all the necessary structures that are required for questions later on. Okay. One process of working with the Venn is to finish the Venn. How would you finish the Venn? Exactly the same way as how you would have data put inside circles. So I would say this is 75 minus X. This would be 55 minus X. So each of my regions are filled up, and I know all of these regions put together should add up to 100%. So 75 minus X plus X plus 55 minus X plus 20 should be my 100%. This is one way of working with a Venn diagram. Now I'll cancel out the X's. 75 plus 55 is 130. 130 plus 20 is 150. So 150 minus X is 100. So X will be 50%. That's exactly what I want. That's your answer, D. So one process of working is a process to finish the Venn, like how I did here. Now this process of finishing the Venn is the most conventional way of working with a Venn diagram. Okay. Anytime in doubt, finish the Venn. But where do I always try to finish the Venn? Where do I use this process in most cases? I use the process of finishing the Venn when I have database questions. When they give me all pieces of data and I just have to fill up the regions of the Venn and work with it. But this process of finishing the Venn, right, will come in very handy when you're working with data sufficiency questions. You'll see later as we pick up data sufficiency questions, you'll have a big advantage of working with a Venn diagram by finishing the Venn rather than use a formula or rather than use a visual representation of a Venn. And I always use the process of finishing the Venn when I work with maximization and minimization questions. I don't think y'all had any maximization, minimization questions in the 10 questions that you solved, but a maximum question would be something which asks you what is the maximum possible value of, what is the minimum possible value of, largest, smallest, greatest, least. I would always prefer to finish the Venn. But when I work with a three set Venn, no, if I work with a three set Venn, the process of finishing the Venn becomes a slightly more tedious proposition. So in that case, what you can do when you're working with a Venn diagram is you can visualize, use a visual process of working with a Venn. And for those who use the formula here, this is how your formula is obtained. Okay, the formula that you'll have rote learned and tried to use at some points of the Venn diagram is obtained by visualizing the regions of the Venn in the form of areas. Let me explain that to you. So I know this entire shaded region, right? The one I'm shading here. This entire shaded region plus what is outside should be my overall total. In this case, the overall total is going to be 100%. So how would I try to find out the area of this shaded region? Very simple. I will take the entire first circle, 75. I will add it to the entire second circle, that's 55. But by adding the two circles, right, I have considered the intersection region twice. I've considered the overlap twice. I can only consider it once if I want the area of the portions inside the circle. So since I've considered the overlap twice, I'm going to remove the extra overlap. So minus x. So 75 plus 55 minus x would give me this entire shaded portion. Plus what is outside? Plus 20 should be equal to my total 100%. This is another way to look at a Venn. And this is the advantage a Venn gives you, where you can actually use a visual process to break it down. And most of you all, for those of you who use the formula, you would have said A plus B minus of A intersection B plus the neither should be equal to your total. That is the formula that you all would use. I'm not going to go with the formula. I'm going with a very logical understanding of the Venn. So this would be X is equal to 50%. Again, I would get the same thing, but with lesser working. Now, for those who went with a table, you can put everything in the form of a table. But can you all tell me, if you're going to create a 2 cross 2 matrix, what would be the rows and the columns that you would put in here? You have to make it 4 quantities, right? So what would be the rows and what would be the columns that you would pick? Because a 2 cross 2 matrix should have 2 rows and 2 columns and a total row and a total column, right? Anyone? So you would say, yes, first correct, answered the first, did not answer the first, total. You would make it 4, right? And then what is the other? Answered the second, did not answer the second, total. And now you would fill in the data here, right? So you would say this is a total of 100%. 75% of a class answered the first question on a test correctly. So this is total. The first question is 75. This should be 25. 55% answered the second question on the test correctly. So this is 55. This should be 45. And 20% answered neither. So neither would be the A1 bar and the A2 bar, which is 20%. Now you have data to fill up the entire table. That's 25%. That would be 50%. That would be 5%. And the question specifically asks me, what percent answered both correctly? So I need this I would pick that and I would move on. So with two quantities, it's absolutely your choice on what you would want to use. I prefer the Venn because of the visual nature that it brings in. Most test takers prefer the table because all you have to do in the table is fill up the blocks. But like I said, the Venn diagram, because of the visual nature, on more harder questions, on maximum questions, and on data sufficiency questions, the Venn diagram is going to be a lot more useful. Okay, and we'll see that as we go forward. Right. Perfect. So, any doubts on this question? I don't expect anyone to have a doubt on this. So, if anyone has a doubt based on the question, also based on what I said, y'all can quickly type into the chat window. Otherwise, we'll move forward to the next. What I would normally suggest, guys, is for those who worked out these 10 questions, once the video is uploaded on GMAT Club, go back, look at the video, and make a note of all those snippets, right? Pause the video at that point, take a screenshot of what I'm writing on the screen, add it to your notes. Okay, it'll be very useful to you. I'm trying to give you extra snippets of how to approach questions the right way. So let's move on to question 2. So question 2 is a pure word problem, has some sort of statistics involved, some sort of translations involved. So when it comes to word problems, right, like I said, slow down, read the question to understand it first. Don't dive right in, because when you dive right in and you start introducing variables and you work with multiple things, you'll have like a khichdi on your sheet of paper, right? It's going to be a mess. So I normally read the question once, understand and visualize it in my mind. Then I go into picking my variable. Then I go into piecing everything together. Okay. So yogurt containers come in 4 different sizes. A grocery store currently has 20 yogurt containers. So I know it's 4 sizes. I'll just call it 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. And there are 20 containers which have an average size of 7.4 ounces. Now, this is what I normally tell my students whenever you see information of the average given to you. The average, right, on its own is not very nice information to have. But from the average, right, I can get to a definite piece of information. Whenever you see averages given to you, always get to the total, right? So immediately I'll say the total is going to be 7.4 times 20, right? That's 74 times 2, which is going to be 148. So all of these have to add up to 148 ounces. Now, if there are 7 containers of 4 ounces each, okay, 3 containers of 10 ounces each, so I'll write 7 containers of 4 ounces, 3 containers of 10 ounces, and half of the remaining containers contain X ounces of yogurt. So 7 containers and 3 containers make it 10 containers. I have a total of 20. So I'm left with 10. Half of the remaining containers. So the remaining containers are going to be 10. So half of them would be 5 containers. Contain X ounces each, while the other half, that's another 5, contains 2X ounces each. So 7 plus 3 is 10, 10 plus 5 is 15, 15 plus 5 is 20. There's a total of 20 containers. And I know now the total ounces should add up to 148 ounces. So what are my total ounces? 7 times 4, which would be 28, plus 30, plus 5x, plus 10x is equal to 148. So 15x is equal to 148 minus 58. 15x is equal to 90. X would be 6. A very simple question to start with. What was important though for you to understand is 2 things. What are your takeaways here is 2 things. One, I wanted you to observe how I broke down the pieces of information step by step by step. Right? I saw the average given to me. I paused. I immediately found the sum. I immediately found the total because that's going to be more useful to me. And then I read the question slowly in parts. I did not rush through my entire process of working, right? I read it slowly in parts. I tried to as far as possible structure my work in the form of a tabular approach. And then I translated the question as I was moving forward, step by step by step, pieced all my information together, solved for what the question's asking. It is very important in a word problem for you to read the question slowly, navigate through the question part by part by part. All right. Again, I don't expect too many to have a doubt in this, but if you do, let me know. Any doubt, guys? Anyone want me to explain something again, or good to move on to the next? Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's work with this now. In a college placement, 100 students attended an interview process and each of them got a job offer. 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree got finance jobs. Immediately, when I read this question, I see they're saying 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree. So I have two quantities there: master's degree, had a master's degree, did not have a master's degree, got finance jobs. So that's my third quantity, finance jobs. And 25% of the students who got non-finance jobs. So again, I see non-finance job, that's my fourth quantity. So immediately when you're reading the question, when you see that you have four quantities like this, two pairs of quantities. One pair was people with a master's degree, not a master's degree, finance job, not a finance job. That's an indicator that it would be better for you to set up a 2x2 matrix, right? So I'm going to set it up here. Master's degree, no master's degree, total. Always keep a total row and a total column. Finance jobs, no finance job, total. So once I've made my decision on how I need to collate my data, I'm going to use a table here. I'm going to ensure that I read the question very, very carefully and break it down part by part by part. In a college placement, 100 students attended an interview process and each of them got a job offer. So I have a total of 100 students. I'm going to fill the overall total. 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree got finance jobs. So I want you to break this information down. Normally, what test takers do is they rush through the reading of such a statement. They get confused on what you're taking the percentage of, right? Remember, if you're getting confused with and you're putting percentages into wrong blocks they belong to, simple rule of thumb is see what you're taking the percentage of. 20% off what? The students who did not have a master's degree. So the students who did not have a master's degree is this block. So they're telling me 20% of this block got finance jobs. So at this point, I don't know what this block is, so I'm going to call it X. 20% of X got finance jobs. So that's 20 by 100X. This would be 80 by 100X. You see, I'm navigating to the question. I don't know what information I've got further. Next, 25% of the students who got non-finance jobs. What am I taking the percentage of? Students who got non-finance jobs. That is this. I'm going to call that as Y. 25% of the students who got non-finance jobs have a master's degree. So this is 25 by 100Y. This would be 75 by 100Y. Doesn't matter. At this point, I'm working with my table. And now they give me some information that I can make use of. 68% of the students got finance jobs. So they're giving me this as 68%. Right? So now since they're giving me that data, this makes the question way easier. I will just redo my table. This would be 32%, right? And now if this is 32%, I can fill up everything else because they're telling me that 25% of the students who got non-finance jobs, that is 25% is 1/4 of 32, which is 8, also have a master's degree. So this would be 8%, this would be 24%. And I have 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree, right, got finance jobs. So now think about it, right? What is the other piece of information that I can put in the table, right? Any other piece of information that I can quickly fill up in the table, guys? What else can I fill up with the information that I have? 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree got finance jobs. So if this is X, that would be 20% of X. What else can I fill up? So the questions ask me what percent of the students who attended the interview process have a master's degree, right? So I need this. Any idea? What else can I fill up here? Anyone would want to type in the chat window? I've put in the 68. I've got this as 32. So I have a total of 100, right? What else can I do? 20 and 80% of no MD. Yes. So when we had this as X, right, we had 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree to get to have finance jobs, right? So this is going to be 20 by 100x. So 24% would be 80 by 100x, right? And what else? What else can I do? Anyone? Quickly, guys, in the chat window, interact with me. I don't want it to be a monotone where I'm just explaining the question. So what would I do at this point? Cross multiply. 0.24 plus 0.2x is equal to x. Yes. Right? 0.2 plus 0.24 will be equal to x. Okay. Remember, this is all absolute. This is all exact values, right? So what would I do if I have an exact value of 100? This would be 68. This would be 32. This would be 24. This would be 8, right? And that is 20% of x, right? So 20 by 100x plus 24 is equal to x, right? So that's 0.2, isn't it? So I would have 80 by 100x is equal to 24. I can easily solve for it. 24 into 100 divided by 80. So 8 threes are, that would give me 30. So x is 30. So if this is 30, this would be 70. And if this is 70, this would be 62. Right? So what is the question asking me? What percent of the students who attended the interview process have the master's degree? That is 70%. Right? That's my answer. Or directly, I can just do 100 minus 30 is 70. Got it? So remember, at some points, you may have to introduce variables even in a table and navigate through the question. If you all have made mistakes on this question, it would have been because you all didn't read the percentage statements correctly. If you're getting caught out with those percentage statements, always remember the simple strategy. What are you taking the percentage of? What is the entire sentence that is attached to the word of? 20% of the students who did not have a master's degree. So what is the block here that represents the students who did not have a master's degree? This block. It's not 20% of your overall total. Got it? All right. Any doubt on this? Okay. Okay. I'm assuming all of you all know what is the format of a data sufficiency. So I'm not going to go into explaining what the answer choices are. I mean, obviously, you're going to have the 5 answer choices below. You know what A, B, C, D, and E means. So I'm going to dive right in. Remember, when you have data sufficiency questions with a word problem, simple rule of thumb, when you see a data sufficiency question, spend time on the question stem. Always learn to spend time on the question stem. Set up the question. Introduce your variables. Doesn't matter if you have more than one variable. Introduce your variables. Translate the question and set up the question as an algebraic equation. You need to know exactly what you're solving for. And you should also ask yourself one thing: what kind of data sufficiency am I dealing with? There are always two kinds of data sufficiency questions. The first is a value based data sufficiency question, and the second is a yes no data sufficiency question. It's important for you to know what kind you're dealing with, because the way we approach a value based data sufficiency question is very different from the way we approach a yes no data sufficiency question. In a value data sufficiency question, I need to get one unique answer. In a yes no data sufficiency question, I need to answer the question with a yes or a no. So when you're working with any data sufficiency question, guys, ensure that you spend a lot of time on the question stem. Again, like I said, if you slow down, invest your time in the question, everything else will fall into place very quickly. If you don't slow down and rush through, it becomes very difficult for you to work with the statements. Plugging in values should not be your approach to work with questions like this. It should be algebraic. Plugging in should only be a last resort when the algebra process does not work. So I'm going to read the question first. Larry saves X dollars per month. X dollars per month. Will Larry's total savings of 1 year from now, so exceed his present savings by at least $500? So what is the meaning of this? He has some present savings, and they are asking me what will be whether the total savings 1 year from now will exceed the present savings by at least $500. So I know for sure he has some present savings. So let me define that as some variable. Let me say the present savings is Y dollars. And what is he doing? He is saving X dollars per month. And the questions ask me, will Larry's total savings 1 year from now? So if he's saving X dollars per month for 1 year, he would have saved 12X dollars. And the question's asking me, will Larry's total savings, what is his total savings? His total savings will be his present savings plus what he saved during the course of the year. So will Larry's total savings, that is Y plus 12X, exceed his present savings by at least $500? So they're telling me the difference of his total savings and his present savings should be greater or equal to $500. So they're saying Y plus 12X minus Y should be at least greater than or equal to 500. This is what my question is asking. Is the total savings exceeding the present savings by $500? That means the difference between the two should be greater than or equal to 500. So what I want you all to observe is how I spend time on the question stem. I defined my variable or variables. I read the question carefully. I pieced everything together and I set up my question as an algebraic equation. Obviously, I'm going to simplify this. I'm not going to stick to that question. So the question is basically asking me, is 12x greater than or equal to 500? Or is x greater than or equal to 500 by 12? That will be 250 by 6. This is what I have, or 250 by 6, I can divide by 125 by 3. Let me directly write that down. So this is what I need to prove, right? I'm going to box it up. This is my question. It's a yes no data sufficiency question. I have to ensure that I answer my question with a yes or a no. I'm going into the first statement now. See, I've broken the question down so far. I've invested all my time on the question. Now, since I have my question set up, I have my variables defined, I have my target question in mind, I know what kind of data sufficiency I'm dealing with. Now I would go into the statements. And if you invest this much time to set up your questions, your statements will be very easy for you to work. So in 6 months, Larry's total savings will be $900. So I know he's saving X dollars per month. In 6 months, he would save 6X dollars. So his total savings will be his present savings, Y, plus 6X is equal to 900. This is the first equation. You see, all I did was translate the statement based on what information I have set up. And now my job is to see whether this information is going to be enough for me to answer my question. Clearly here I don't know what the value of Y is, right? Y can be anything I want. So I will not be able to answer the question definitively. I will be able to get yes cases, I'll be able to get no cases. In fact, if I put Y is equal to 0, then in that case X will be 150. 150 is definitely greater than or equal to 125 by 3. That would give me a yes case. But if I put Y as a, let's say, easy value, Y as 300, then 6X would be 600. Then X would be 100. In that case, I would get a no. You see what I'm doing? I'm not just directly discarding this statement. In my mind, I'm running through a possibility where I can answer my question with a yes, I can answer my question with a no. Because you can only discard a statement in a yes no data sufficiency. You can only discard a statement if you get a yes case and a no case. So very quickly, I said if Y is equal to 0, I will get X is equal to 150. That will answer my question with a yes. If Y is equal to 300, since I don't know what Y is, X will be 900 minus 300, 600, 100. That will give me a no. So clearly the first statement is not enough. The three possible answer choices will be BC. I'm using the ADBC approach. I'm assuming most of you all know what it is. If you don't, then I would encourage you to read up on that. Right? It's just the way the format is in terms of the answer choices. Now I'll go to the second step. In 3 months, Larry's total savings will exceed his present savings by 150. So in 3 months, every month he's saving X, so he would save 3X. Larry's total savings, so that will be Y plus 3X, will exceed his present savings, so that is minus Y by 150 is equal to 150. So the Y cancels. I get 3X is equal to 150, right? I get X is equal to 50, right? And that's going to answer my question with a definite no. X is equal to 50 is not going to be greater than or equal to 125 by 3. That would give me sufficient B. Okay with this, all of you all? Yes? How many of you all got B? If you did, great. Any doubts on how I work with it? I want you to hold on to all the pointers I'm giving you. You need to spend time on breaking down the question stem. I want you all to see how I set up my question, how I spent time understanding it, how I wrote down what my question is asking me, how I simplified it to the lowest form, how I got to my target question, how I boxed it up. Once I did that, once I invested my time in the question, it became easy for me to work with my statements. Any doubts, guys, on this? Or can we move on to the next? Okay. Another data sufficiency. So like I said, right, whenever I see a data sufficiency question and By the look of it, 23 are assigned to Project Alpha, 18 are assigned to Project Beta. How many employees are assigned to both? I'm sure people would have used a when. I'm sure people would have used a table as well. Anyone would do. I have two quantities. I can use any one. But like I said, right, when I'm working with a data sufficiency question, especially with a Venn diagram, I would prefer to finish the Venn. There's a reason for that, because if I'm able to finish my Venn, right? If I'm able to finish my Venn, then I will be able to observe all of the regions. Each of my regions will be represented by some piece of information, like an algebraic term or with some number. And I'll be able to observe those regions. And second, I'll be able to form an algebraic equation using the total. So again, if I was setting this question up, remember, I'm going to spend time on my question stem. What do I do on a data sufficiency? Spend time on the question stem, set the question up, set it up as an algebraic equation. Many people dive right into the statements. I'm going to spend time on the question. So I'm going to set it up here. At a company with 36 employees, so I have a total of 36 employees, 23 are assigned to Project Alpha and 18 are assigned to Project Beta. How many employees are assigned to both projects? So I'm going to draw the Venn. So I have Project Alpha, 23 are assigned. Project Beta, 18 are assigned. How many employees are assigned to both projects? So I need this X. Now, one big trap whenever you're working with Venns or whenever you're working with tables is many people will assume the outer region to be zero. You can't until it's categorically mentioned. You cannot assume the outer region to be zero, right? So two things, remember, when you're setting up the Venn, don't assume the outer region is zero. So I would prefer to finish the Venn here. So 23 minus X, this is 18 minus X, and that's Y. And I know I can create an equation out of this. You see, I've not gone into my statements yet, right? Because I want to set everything up. Because when I go to my statements, it's just going to be simple translations. So I know 23 minus X plus 18 minus X plus Y is equal to 36. X cancels. 23 plus 18 is a 41. So 41 minus X plus Y is equal to 36. I'll take the 36 to the left hand side. So Y plus 5 is equal to X is what we get, right? When I work with this. So this is the equation I've got. And what is the question asking me to solve for? What is the value of X? So clearly, if I need the value of X, I need the value of Y. Now is where I would go into working with my statements. First, 5 employees are not assigned to either project. So Y is equal to 5. That clearly would give me what X is sufficient. AD. Second, exactly 21 employees are assigned to only one of the two projects. This is the region of only one, only one. So 23 minus X plus 18 minus X. You see, that's the advantage of finishing the Venn. You have each region represented by some number or some algebraic term. So it becomes easy for you to translate the statements. The only thing that you have to worry about is look at which region it belongs to. So 23 minus X plus 18 minus X is given to me as 21. So clearly, I'm not going to do the working, but clearly I can solve for X there. I can get to an answer sufficient delta, right? You can use the 2 cross 2 matrix as well for those who did. With two quantities, you're free to do it absolutely fine. You'll do the same thing at the end of the day, right? But I want you to hold on to the fact that you see the previous question of data sufficiency and this question, I spent time on the question stem. I set it up, right? I set up my Venn. I didn't just put the data on the Venn and move forward to my statements. I set up my Venn. I finished my Venn. I set up an equation using the total. I boxed that information. I boxed what my question was asking. And once I had everything set up, only then I went into my statements and I worked with it. When I went into my statements, since I had everything set up, everything boiled down to a simple translation to what I already have. Got it? Ritu's asking me about whether I have any video of yours on data sufficiency. Ritu, I think there should be some video. You can just search on the YouTube channel. But I will be doing two data sufficiency sessions going forward. Data sufficiency where I focus on word problems, and data sufficiency where I focus on, you know, putting in values, logical based data sufficiency questions. I'll be taking two sessions going forward, right? You can just, look at the schedule, right, on for the sessions that I have, and see when those two sessions come about. Okay. Any doubts, guys, on this question? Any sort of issues? Did you all try it out a different way? Did you get stuck somewhere? You see, I'm just using the structures that I believe in, right? I am always going to break down the question stem. That is my simple funda of working with the data sufficiency. As if I invest enough amount of time on my question stem, I know my pieces will fall together very nicely with my statements. Got it? Any sort of doubt? Okay, let's move forward. How many of you all found this question to be hard? Because what happens sometimes on word problems and on data sufficiency, you'll have to learn to respect the question type, and you'll have to read and comprehend the meaning of the questions, right? So again, focusing on the question. Sometimes in a data sufficiency question, you will always be given some constraint. A constraint is a definite piece of information that has to be respected throughout the question. So there is at least one viper and at least one cobra in Pandora's box. So I have some Pandora's box. There's at least one viper. So there should be a minimum of one viper, and there should be a minimum of one cobra. Right? Let's rewrite that. This is information that the question directly gives me. It's a constraint that I cannot violate. Any constraints that are given to you in a data sufficiency question have to be respected. They are facts. It's like a critical reasoning argument, right? What facts are given in a critical reasoning argument have to be respected. You cannot go against them. How many cobras are there? So the question is asking me, how many cobras are there? It's a value-based data sufficiency question. I need to be able to get to one unique answer for me to say something is sufficient. There's nothing more I can do with the question, right? There's nothing more I can do with the question. All I know is I have Pandora's box. There's minimum of one viper, one cobra, and they're asking me how many cobras are there in Pandora's box. So I go to the statements. Let's go to the first statement. Now this is where you have to read the questions carefully. From any two snakes from Pandora's box. That means if you put your hand inside the Pandora's box, hopefully they don't, hopefully you don't get, a snake bite. But if you put your hand inside the Pandora's box and you pick up any two snakes, at least one is a viper. So let's try to understand that meaning, right? If I put my hand in the box and I pick up two snakes, I will always have minimum one viper. At least one viper means I can have one viper, I can have two vipers, I can have three vipers, and so on. But if I put my hand inside the box and I pick up two snakes, I will always have at least one viper. So what does that mean? The number of vipers, the number of vipers can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be any. Because I'm at least going to get one viper. I know minimum there has to be one viper. That's what the question is telling me anyway. So if I put my hand inside the box and I pick up two snakes, I will always get one viper. But what does that also mean? That I cannot have two cobras. I cannot have two cobras in the box because, say, let's take the scenario. Suppose I have two vipers and one cobra. Any two snakes that I pick up from Pandora's box, one will definitely be a viper. At least one will definitely be a viper. So what are those two scenarios? I would have one viper, one cobra, or two vipers. So it satisfies what the first statement gives me. But if I have two vipers and two cobras, if I pick any two, the statement is telling me if I pick any two snakes from Pandora's box, at least one is a viper. If I have two vipers and two cobras, there is a possibility that when I pick any two snakes, I can get two cobras as well. And that would go against the entire statement. Remember, any statement given to you in a data sufficiency question is also a fact. It's a cardinal truth. You cannot violate that statement. The scenarios that you can take can only satisfy the fact. So the statement says, any two snakes that I pick from Pandora's box, at least one has to be a viper. So that basically means that the minimum number or the maximum number of cobras that I can have in that box is only one cobra. Because if I had two cobras, then there is a possibility that if I pick two snakes, both will be cobras, which will violate the first statement. What is the first statement telling me? That I have cobras and vipers in the box, that anytime I put my hand inside the box and I pick up two snakes, I will at least have one viper. Every time I will at least have one viper. That fact will never be satisfied if I have more than one cobra in the box. Because if I have more than one cobra, I can have a possibility where when I pick two snakes, both of them are cobras as well. So what does that mean? I cannot have two cobras. There has to be only one cobra. Now you can ask me, why not zero cobras? I cannot have zero cobras because the question stem tells me there has to be at least one. So the only way I can satisfy my first statement is I have to have maximum of one cobra. I can have how many ever vipers I want. But I have to have a maximum of one cobra. And that's the only possibility. So the first statement is sufficient. AD. The second is a quick kill, right? The total number of snakes in Pandora's box is 99. I mean, how can I say if the total number of snakes is 99, how many of them would be cobras, right? I can have one cobra, I can have 97 cobras also, right? So clearly not going to be enough. Alpha. Got this, guys? It's very important for you to understand the format of the question. Whenever a statement is given to you, that statement is a fact. It's a cardinal truth. You cannot violate that statement. So if you are generating scenarios for that statement, you have to respect that statement to the T. What does the statement tell me? If I pick any two snakes from Pandora's box, at least one has to be a viper. So what is the inference that I can draw? That if at least one has to be a viper, if I pick any two, I cannot have more than one cobra. Because if I do, then if I pick two snakes, there is a possibility I can get two cobras. Got this? This is, I would say, a mid-level question, not too difficult as well, right? It's just about critical reasoning, and this is a normal trend that we find in the focus edition as well, right? A lot of questions on data sufficiency specifically also integrate a lot of critical reasoning. In fact, I've come across a question that does not deal with mathematical data at all. It just gives me logical data and asks in the format of a data sufficiency and asks me to solve and get to an answer. That's why I've kept two data sufficiency sessions where I discuss both of those types. Okay. Any doubt, guys, on this question? Yes. Yes, Shubham, what you're saying is right. Okay. All right. So, again, a data sufficiency question. Again, a toss up between a when and a table. I think most of you all might have, some of you all, half of you all might have taken a table here. Half of all would have used a when. I'll stick to the when. You can make the table. The reason I stick to the when is because I need to deal with only two quantities. With the table, I put four and I have to set it up. You can do it both ways. If you want me to do it as a table, guys, please let me know. I don't mind doing it. The reason, again, I said I prefer the when is because it's visual in nature. So let's again simply follow what we discussed before. I've already put the ground rules that are required for any data sufficiency question. I've also put the ground rules of what to do when you have a Venn diagram data sufficiency question. I said it's always best to finish the Venn. So let's apply that into practice. Of the 60 families in a certain neighborhood, 38 have a cat. How many of the families have a dog? So in my mind, there are two animals here, cat and dog. I can have a family that can have both, right? So there's an overlap that is definitely possible. So I would prefer to draw the when. I have a total of 60 families. 38 have a cat, so let me call this circle C. 38 have a cat. How many of the families in the neighborhood have a dog? So I'll call this circle D. D is what they're asking me to solve for. I'll call this D, right? I need to solve for D. D is equal to what? Right? It's how many. So it's a value data sufficiency question. I need to get to one unique answer. Now, what most of you all would have done, if you look at your working on your sheet, you would have immediately gone into the statements and tried to work with it. I said, when you work with the when on data sufficiency, finish the when. You will be rewarded for investing this time in data sufficiency and you'll be more accurate as well. So I've not been given any information. You can ask, Aditya, how can you finish the when here? No problem. I can define it as variables, but I'm never going to go and put A, B, C, D and work with it. The best way to bring in variables in a when and limit the number of variables you choose is to start with the intersection. So if the intersection is not given, call it X. So this will be 38 minus X. This will be D minus X. And that would be Y. Don't worry, right? You see, instead of using A, B, C, D, I've just used three variables to break it down instead of four, right? So the best way to introduce variables in a when is again start inside out. Then I will add everything up. I know everything added should be 60. 38 minus X plus D minus X plus Y is equal to 60. So X cancels. And I have D minus X plus Y is equal to 60 minus 38, which is going to be 22. This is what I have. This is the information I have. And from this information, I need to be able to solve for D. That's what my entire end goal is. I've set everything up. I have all my regions represented by some algebraic representation. I have an entire equation that I can use to my total. I know exactly what I'm looking for. I go into my statements. First statement. 28 of the families in the neighborhood have a cat but not a dog. So have a cat but not a dog means having only a cat. So that is this entire portion. So 38 minus X, what I have represented in my Venn diagram as 38 minus X is 28. So X would give me 10. This is what I have from the first statement. Remember, I need to solve for D. I only have information about X. I have absolutely no clue about Y. Some of y'all would have forgotten to take the outer region itself. Okay. Remember, the outer region is necessary. You cannot assume it to be zero unless categorically mentioned. So I have X. I don't have Y. I can't solve for D. Clearly insufficient. PCE. Second, the number of families in the neighborhood who have a dog and a cat, that is X, is the same as the number of families who have neither a cat nor a dog. That is Y. You see, I'm just translating what I have, right? I'm translating the information by linking it to my regions of the Venn. The number of families in the neighborhood who have a dog and a cat is the same as the number of families who have neither a cat nor a dog. So x is equal to y. And remember, I have this equation here. If x is equal to y, and I know d minus x plus y is 22, x and y would cancel out. Because y is equal to x and a minus x and a plus x would cancel out to give me d is equal to 22. And that's going to be enough for me to solve. Sufficient. B. See, again, I've put in the structures of what needs to be done in a Venn diagram data sufficiency question. Finish the Venn. The advantage that you get by finishing the Venn is every portion of your Venn diagram is represented with a variable. You'll get an algebraic equation using the total. And once you have everything set up, your statements become to simple translations of what you already have. Got it? Any doubt? Mostly, some people would have picked A on this. If you picked A, the biggest mistake would be you assuming the outer region to be 0. Some test takers would have picked C. C because you've not evaluated the two statements individually well. Normally, C will be the trap answer here. Most of you all would have fallen for the trap because you didn't work your way through the statements. And because the reason why you didn't work your way through the statements because it's a data sufficiency, right? I don't need to solve. So I'll stop and say it's insufficient without checking. It's not a way to work. You see, that's the reason why I'm spending time upfront in the question to set it up, because it avoids falling for all of these traps. Got it? Any doubts, guys? Can we move on to the next? Okay. Anybody wants me to solve it using the table? Are you good to go? Okay. Now, this is a very nice question, right? I'm sure most of you all would have tripped up on this. Some of you all would have found this question relatively hard to work with. How many found this question hard when you all worked it in a time limit? Quickly, can you all answer? Okay. Found it hard. All right. So how did you all work with it? Did you all go directly with a process of translating the question and working with it, or did you all, some of you all try with values, work with values, and see where it got you? Okay. All right. So whenever you see questions like this, right, it's very important for you to make a decision from the outset. As soon as I glance at this question, right, as soon as I glance at this question, I know I have to make a decision. Either I have to go conventional and work with it with any kind of word problem. But if I go conventional, I need to define my variable or variables properly. I need to set things up well, navigate through the question, translate, and set up my equations. Or if I glance at my answer choices, if I glance at the answer choices, I see that all the answer choices here are variables. It has variables in them. These are what we call variables in the answer choices. Whenever you see information, or whenever you see answer choices where you have variables in the answer choices, it opens up the opportunity for you to pick values and work. And on top of that, this is also a percentage based question. So using 100 in a smart way would also be a good process of working, right? So the first thing I want you all to understand when it comes to a word problem, right? Glance at the question. As soon as you see a question where there are fractions and percentages in the question, and fractions and percentages in the answer choices. It gives you the opportunity to pick values and work. Second, if you see a question where you have variables in the answer choices, there also you have an opportunity to use values and bypass the conventional. So what we'll do is let's solve this question in both ways. Let's look at it conventionally and let's look at it using numbers as well. Last Sunday, a certain store sold copies of newspaper A for $1 each. Right? So this is $1. And copies of newspaper B for $1.25 each. And the store sold no other newspapers that day. If R percent of the store's revenues from the newspaper sales were from newspaper A, so they're telling me that I have R percent of my total revenue is from A. And if P percent of the newspapers that the store sold were copies of newspaper A. So they're telling me P percent of what the store sold were copies of A. Which of the following expresses R in terms of P? Now I see this question, I try to study the data. I have something about the revenue. Obviously, the revenue will depend upon the price per newspaper, and it also depends upon the number of newspapers sold, right? So I don't know how many numbers of newspapers were sold. So that is my instinct. Since I want the revenue, I want the number of newspapers sold. So I will say let the total number of newspapers sold be X, right? So if the total number of newspapers sold is X, P percent of the newspapers sold were of newspaper A. Yes? All of y'all? So if P percent of the newspapers sold were for newspaper A, how many newspapers were sold for A? P X by 100. Yes? And if Px by 100 is the number of newspapers sold for A, how many newspapers were sold for B? That would be X minus Px by 100, right? So X minus Px by 100 times 1.25. This is 1.25. Right? This is this number of newspapers sold for B. Now, what would be my revenue for A? The revenue would be Px by 100 times 1. So I leave it as it is. And the revenue for B will be X minus Px by 100 times 1.25. This would be the revenue from B. And what are they telling me? If P percent of the newspapers, if R percent of the store's revenues from newspaper sales was from newspaper A. So what was the total revenue? The total revenue should be this plus this. And they are saying R percent of this, that is R by 100 of Px by 100 plus X minus Px by 100 into 1.25. R percent of this is the revenue for newspaper A. So R percent of the total revenue should be the revenue for A, which is Px by 100. Now, if you go conventional, this is the best way to work, right? You can limit your variables. You see how I picked my variable and I said, let the total newspapers sold be X, and then built the question from there. And then I broke the percentages down. If R percent of the store's revenues, what am I taking R percent of? The total revenues was from newspaper A. So R percent of this total revenue is Px by 100. So immediately I can cancel out the hundreds on both sides. I can open this up if I want, right? So R times px by 100 plus 1.25x minus 1.25 px by 100 is equal to px. Right? So what can I do further? R into px by 100, that's 1.25x. Px by 100 minus 1.25 px by 100 will be minus 0.25 px by 100 is equal to px. I can take the x out common. So Rx is 1.25 minus 0.25 p divided by 100 is equal to px. I can cancel out the x on both sides. What is the question asking me? What is R? Which of the following represents R in terms of p? So I need to isolate R. So I'll simplify it further. I'm doing it here, guys. So R 1.25 into 100 is 125 minus 0.25 p divided by 100 is equal to p. So R will be p divided by this entire term. And if I divide p by this entire term, the 100 would go on top. That's 100p divided by 125 minus 0.25p. But I see the answer choices and none of them have a decimal. So I'm going to remove the decimal. I'm going to multiply the numerator by 4. I'm going to multiply the denominator by 4 as well. So that will be 400p divided by 125 times 4 is 500 minus p. That would be my answer. Delta. If you're going conventional, you'll have to be patient with this. Now, normally the question people will ask me, this is an official question. This is not a. This is if you go up and look up the data. This is actually an official question, right? Now people ask me, but this going to take me so much of time. Remember, guys, it's not 2 minutes per question, okay? And that's a misconception that normally a lot of test takers have. It's 2 minutes on an average. So on some questions, to be very truthful, maybe inequalities or on number property questions, you can spend maybe a minute, right? So if you spend a minute on a question, you can spend 3 minutes on the other, and the total time will still average out to 2. So you see what I did, right? When I read the question, I set things up well. I broke down information. I wrote down the information. R% of the revenue is A, P% sold was A. But then when I saw that I needed revenue, I realized that I need to know how many newspaper A and newspaper B was sold. So I took the total sold as X. So from that X, I could find out that P% of X sold were A, so PX by 100. The remaining should be B, so X minus PX by 100. I found out the revenue. I found out the revenue for A. I found out the revenue for B. Now I read the next part. It said R% of the total revenue was from A. What is my total revenue? PX by 100 plus X minus PX by 100 into 1.25. I added the two. I took R% of that. That R% of my total revenue should be the revenue for A. I set it up. And then I broke the equation, or I simplified. And then I read the question. It said, give me R in terms of P. So if I need R in terms of P, I isolated the R. I took everything below P. I saw that none of my answer choices had a decimal in them. I got rid of the decimal by multiplying and dividing by 4. Got to my answer. Okay with this? If you're working with a question in a conventional process, it is important for you to collate the information and to put the right variables. You need to ask yourself, what did I require for the revenue? I needed the newspapers sold. Have they given me that? No, they just told me P% of the newspapers sold were A. So I have to define what the newspapers sold was. So I took the total sold as X and I worked with it. Make sense? Yes? Okay. Any doubts in the conventional process? Because I will be solving this also using values, right? Any doubts in this process? Can we go into the discussion with values as well? Okay. So actually, I'll bring it back. Okay. If I was going with values, this is the rule. When you're working with values, you always pick a value, especially when you have variables in the answer choices. You always pick a value for the variables in the answer choices. And I see my answer choices. There's only one variable in my answer choices, and that's P. If you're picking values in a question where you have variables in the answer choices, you always pick a value for the variables in your answer choices, right? Now, again, they've told me A, they've given me B, $1, $1.25. I know R percent of the revenue is from A, and I know P percent of the total sold is again for A. It's a percentage based question as well. So I need for me to calculate the revenue, I need how many papers were sold. So I took the total sold as X, but since I'm working with a percentage based question, right? And I also have the answer choices also in terms of fractions and variables, I can be flexible by picking a value. So instead of taking X, I'll say let the total sold be 100. Okay, let the total newspapers sold be 100. And I know P percent of the newspapers that were sold were copies of newspaper A. So I'm going to say, okay, let P be 25. You see, I'm substituting P as 25. That is the variable in my answer choices. So I'm calling P as 25. I'm putting a box over it so that I remember it. So 25% of the newspapers sold were from newspaper A. Or 20, you can take 20 as well, you can take 40 as well. I wouldn't take 50 because 50 would make both equal. I want to keep numbers as different as possible. Actually, to be very truthful, since I have a 1.25, I think 20 would be a better value, because then if I do 80% of 1.25, it'll get me a whole number value. So this is why you have to be smart with the values. Okay, when you're working with values, you have to try to pick values which make your life simpler. So I took the total sold as 100. I'm taking P as 20. So P percent of those sold were for A. So 20, and this is 80. So what is the revenue for A? The revenue for A would be $20. And the revenue for B would be $100. 1.25 times 80. So the total revenue is $120. Now what are they telling me? If R percent of the store's revenues from newspaper sales were from newspaper A. Now, what is the total revenue that I have? 120. Out of that, how much is the revenue that A is bringing in? 20. So, what would be the percentage of revenue that A brings in? 20 by 120 times 100. 26, huh? That will give me 100 by 6. Simplify, which gives me 50 by 3. And what is this 50 by 3? This 50 by 3 is actually R. Because what are they telling me? R percent of the store's revenue from newspaper sales was from newspaper A, right? So they're telling me the percentage of revenue from A with respect to the overall total. So the percentage has to be 50 by 3%. It's 20 out of 120 to 100. So I've got R. That is my reference answer. So this is how you would work when you have variables in your answer choices. You would put in a value. You would put in a value for the variable in your answer choices. You would solve the questions using numbers, and you would get to a reference answer. Now, what must you do? You need to take that value of P, you need to put it back into each of your answer choices and see which one gives you the output of 50 by 3. The one which gives you the output of 50 by 3 would be your answer, right? So that's 100 times 20 divided by 125 minus 20 is going to be a 105. That's giving me a 21, and that's 20. That's 400 by 21. Clearly not possible. 150 into 20 divided by 230. That's not going to give me a 50 by 3 for sure. 300 into 20 divided by 355. That's going to give me some weird 71, right? If I simplify, that's not going to be a possibility. 400 into 20 divided by 500 minus 20 is 480. Let's simplify this. So the zeros go. 2 24s are. Then I can remove 4 6 are 24, 400s. I can remove 2, that's 50. That gives me 50 by 3. I would pick D and I would move on. Got it? So whenever you see a question in a word problem, remember you always have two choices, right? Especially when you see a question where you have fractions and percentages in the question and in the answer choices, or if you have a question where you have variables in the answer choices, you have the option of bypassing the conventional process. You can go conventional. If you're going if you want to stick with the conventional process, then you have to remember you have to define your variables well. You need to translate the question step by step, piece everything together, and make do with a little bit of extra algebraic calculations. But if you're overwhelmed with the amount of algebra and you feel that you do better with numbers because you process it much better, it's always better to make that choice at the outset to pick values and work, right? Don't go halfway and then shift. Make the decision in the beginning. I see variables in the answer choices. I'm more adept towards putting in values and working. It'll be give me more comfort. Put in values, but put in values well. Percentages give you the option of using 100 to your advantage, and you always put in a value to match with the variable that the answer choices give you, right? Substitute for the variable in the substitute for that variable in the answer choices. Work your way through the question, solve, get to a reference answer. The only problematic process here would be when you have to navigate through the 5 answer choices to see which one gives you a reference answer. Got it? uh See, Rafael, you these kinds of questions will only come at higher levels. Okay, because this is a 10 question set. The last 2 3 questions are slightly of a higher difficulty. But if you're doing well on the test, you're going to see these kinds of questions. Okay, where decision making will come into play, where reading will come into play. Right, it will take you a good part of 2 3 minutes. But like I said, right, it's not you're not going to see multiple questions which is going to take you 3 to 4 minutes to solve. There will be 1 or 2 questions where you need to spend time and you need to work your way through. But ideally, I would be okay spending 3 minutes or 4 minutes on a question if I've saved time on the questions that I've answered previously, right? All right. Okay with this? Any doubts, guys? Okay. So let's move on to question 9. Great. Now I'm sure in this question, those who started using the table, in all the previous questions will be forced to pick a when, right? So it's a 3 set when, so you have to work with it. But remember, I'm gonna still follow the same approach. The only thing is when I'm working with the 3 set when, you have the option of visualizing it. But I'm gonna stick to my process of working. Whenever I see a data sufficiency question with a when, I will spend time on the question. I'll put in all the information that is possible. I will finish my when. I will set up my equation, and then I will work with my statements. Okay, so let's do that. A poll conducted among the members of a football fan club revealed that 100 of them root for Portugal. Okay. 150 of them root for France. And 200 of them root for Argentina. As a football fan, I think you should need to root for Portugal and Ronaldo a lot more. But let's continue. Also, 150 of them root for exactly 2 of the 3 teams. So 150 of them root for exactly 2 of the 3 teams. Now, which portions of my when represent exactly 2? It's this, this, and this. So I'm going to call it A, B, and C. So I know A plus B plus C is given to me as 150. How many members does the fan club have? So they want me to figure out the overall total, right? So I don't know this, so I'll call this X. I'll finish the when, doesn't matter. So I'm going to say this is 100 minus A minus X minus B. This is 150 minus A minus X minus C. And this is 200 minus B minus X minus C. For those who are not able to visualize, you can add all of this up and you can create your total. But for those who go with the visual process, look at what I need. The total, guys, the totals here. Remember, I need to keep the outer region as Y as well. So the total here would be this entire shaded portion plus what is outside, right? So let me look at it visually instead of sitting and adding all of these up, right? Let's look at it more from a visual aspect. I'm going to take the entire first circle 100. I'm going to add it to the entire second circle 150. I'm going to add it to the entire third circle 200. But by adding all the three circles up, how many times have I considered this overall intersection X? I've considered it thrice because I've considered the entire circles. So I can only consider the intersection once. I've considered it three times. So I'm going to remove two times the extra. And these regions of A, B, and C, I've considered them twice. I've considered A with Portugal and France. I've considered B with Portugal and Argentina. I've considered C with France and Argentina. So I've considered them twice. I've double counted it. So I'm going to remove one time the count plus what is outside. That's why should be equal to my overall total. So you see, I have my regions of the when filled up. I've also created an equation using my total. I can simplify it. Remember, I know A plus B is 150, so I can put 150 here. So 100 plus 150 plus 200 minus 2x minus 150 plus y should be equal to my total. And remove the 150. So my total should be 300 minus 2x plus y. So I have an algebraic equation. I'm going to box it up. Remember, I need to solve for my total. Done. I've set up my question. I have all my portions of the when represented with some algebraic expression. It becomes easy for me to translate. I also have an overall expression for my total that will become easy for me to correlate. Now I would move into the statement. So what does the first statement say? Equal number of members root for Portugal only and for Argentina only. So they're saying only Portugal and only Argentina are equal. What is only Portugal represented by? 100 minus A minus X minus B. And that should be equal to 200 minus B minus X minus C. They're telling me both are equal. So I can remove the X's. I can remove the minus B's. So I have 100 minus A is equal to 200 minus C. So I just have C minus A is equal to 100. But that's not going to be useful for me, right? C minus A is equal to 100 is not helping me figure out the total at all, because the total depends upon X and Y. So clearly, the first statement is not enough. Let's work with the second. I'm doing it this time. The second statement says, for every two members of the club who root for none of the three teams, that means for every two members that root for none of the three teams, there is one member who roots for all three teams. So for every two members here, there is one member here. So basically, y is equal to 2x is what they're giving me. So now I need to see whether this information is going to be enough for me to work. Y is equal to 2x basically makes this 2x. It cancels out the 2x for me and it gives me the total is equal to 300. And that's enough for me to work. B. Again, see all my data sufficiency questions on Venn diagrams. I followed the same approach. I did not deviate, right? I finished the Venn. The advantage the finishing Venn gave me was every region was represented by some algebraic term. It became easy for me to correlate with the statements. And I had an algebraic equation using the total that I could correlate and get to an answer. Got it? All right. Okay with this? Okay. Any doubt, guys? Any doubts here? You can't use a table for this. It'll be very difficult. You'll have to make like three, sets and work, right? Forming equations out of this is also not advisable, right? So I've used the same process, whether it's a two set when or whether it's a three set when. My process remains the same. I'm using the visual way of working. I'm using also the process of finishing my when to my advantage. I've not selected any maximum question here, guys, but if you see any maximization and minimization question also in terms of a Venn diagram, you can identify maximum questions. I told you when you have maximum, minimum, largest, smallest, explore the question by finishing the when. You'll realize that your analysis will be very, very easy for you to make. You'll be able to reason things out also from the equations that you have. All right. Okay, so let's come down to the last question. All right. So the last question is actually like a throwback to my last session on algebra. I took a live session on algebra, some weeks back, a week back, I think, exactly a week back. And in algebra, I spoke about linear, simultaneous, and quadratics. And I spoke about a specific thing called Diophantine, very tongue twister, Diophantine equations. Okay, I spoke about them of how to work with linear equations when you have Diophantine ones. I would encourage you all to go through that video. It gives you a good sense of how to work with data sufficiency questions when you have some Diophantine equations. Okay, I tell you what things you have to take care of when you work with linear equations, simultaneous equations, and quadratic equations in your question, whether it's a data sufficiency or a problem solving. So this question, touches upon what I discussed there a bit. Also touches upon what I discussed in the beginning of the session when I took the data sufficiency question. I said that when you work with the data sufficiency question, always spend time on the question stem. Set things up, make your equations, write down what you need to solve for, figure out what kind of data sufficiency you're dealing with. A casino pays players using purple and orange chips. Each purple chip each purple chip is worth P dollars, and each orange chip is worth N dollars. So my total earnings obviously would be the P dollars into the number of purple chips and N dollars into the number of orange chips. If P and N are integers, critical information, always I'll put the information and box it up. What is the combined value of two purple chips and one orange chip? So let me say I want the combined value, right? Remember P dollars, N dollars. So how do I set information up here? What is the equation that I want? I want the combined value of two purple chips and one orange chips. So two purple chips would be 2P dollars and one orange chip would be 1N. So they ask me to solve for 2P plus 1N, and it's a value data sufficiency question. I need a unique possibility. There's nothing more I can do with the question, right? But I realize just by looking at the question itself, they're asking me to solve for this linear equation. They're giving me P and N to be integers. So whenever you have a linear equation with one variable, one linear equation with two variables. Whenever you have one linear equation with two variables and you have integer limitations that apply, immediately your mind should go towards Diophantine equations. Don't discard those kinds of equations and say they are insufficient. Okay, the normal trend would be that when you see an equation and there are two variables and one equation, people will say I can't solve because I need another equation to work, right? No, that will not be the case, especially when you're given integer limitations. When you're given integer limitations, you have to solve for them by at least putting in values. And in the algebra session, I explained how to put in values and how smartly to work with it. We actually, in that algebra session, we took a lot harder set of equations and work with it. So I encourage all of you all to go through it. You'll definitely have a value add when you attempt such kinds of questions. But let's go into the first statement here. The first statement says the combined value of 5 purple chips and 7 orange chips is 53. So 5p plus 7n is equal to 53. Now, what most test takers will do is they will let this go and they'll say, no, I can't solve for 2p plus 1n here because I have only one linear equation with two variables. Insufficient. Don't do that, right? Work with it. Because you're given p and n to be integers, right? You have to think about chasing this equation. So what did I speak about in the Diophantine equation? I said that whenever you work with Diophantine equations like this, what are Diophantine equations? Very simple. A linear equation where the variables have integer limitations. That is simply a Diophantine equation. Okay. If you see a Diophantine equation, you have to chase it. How do you chase it? Try to find a simple solution. Right? Here it's not easy to find a simple solution. So if you want to work with a simple solution, don't try a hit and trial process of working. Either analyze the question based on evens and odds, but here I see none of my coefficients are even, so evens and odds will not work, or try to use units digit. Try to analyze things based on units digit. When I have a 5 no as a coefficient, it's like a boon to me. So how would I analyze this? I know 5p will always give me something ending with a 0 or ending with a 5. And 53 will always end with a 3 by default, right? I mean, that's the units digit. So if 5p is always going to end with a 0 or end with a 5, 0 plus what should give me a 3? 0 plus 3 can only give me a 3. So 7n should end with a 3. And 5 plus what should also give me a 3? 5 plus 8 will give me a 13, which ends with a 3 again. So I know 7n should either end with a 3 or end with an 8. I'm just looking at it in terms of units digit. If 5p gives me a unit digit of 0 or 5, 0 plus what should give me a unit digit of 3? Addition, right? Normally when you add two terms, the unit digits add up to give you the overall unit digit. So 0 plus 3 gives me 3. And 5 plus what will give me a 3? 5 plus 8 would give me a 3. Because they would have one as a carry, right? So I know that n here, 7n should either end with a 3 or end with an 8. I will take the 8. So if 7n has to end with an 8, I can put n as a 4. So if I put n as 4, I'm going to get 28. 7 fours are 28. 53 minus 28 would be a 25. And then 5p would be 25. So p would be 5. So this is one possible solution to that equation. Here it's very easy for me to find out whether there's another solution or not. So I'll ask myself, okay, the other possibility is 7n has to end with a 3. If 7n has to end with a 3, then n has to be a 9. But if n is a 9, 7 nines are 63. 53 minus 63 will be minus 10. If 5p is minus 10, p will be minus 2. But I cannot have a negative value for cost. So that's not possible. So I know for a fact now there's only one possible solution in this equation. N is equal to 4 and p is equal to 5. Because any other value of n that I put to give me units digits of 3 and 8 will make the value of p negative. There's another way for more complex equations how to work. I have discussed in this video. Please go through it. Not that this is not the time and place for me to discuss that in depth. So n is equal to 4, p is equal to 5 gives me the only solution to that equation. And if I want 2p plus n, I can easily solve for it. 2 into 5 is 10. 10 plus 4 is 14. That is enough for me to work. AD. The second, again, I mentioned this in the algebra session about simultaneous equations, right? When you have simultaneous equations or when you have equations, always reduce things to the lowest form, right? Don't assume that any equation of a higher order will not be able to get to an answer. So always remember, reduce things to the lowest form. The combined value of 6 purple chips plus 3 orange chips, or 3n, is 42. don't just stop there and say it's not enough. You see that there are certain things that are common. So remove the common factor. I divide throughout by 3. 2p plus n is equal to 3 ones are 3, 3 fours are 12. That gives me 14. Exactly what I want. Sufficient as well. Delta. Got it? So this is how you can work with equations like this. Very, very, very prevalent kind of questions on the GMAT. Okay, they will play, especially with data substance, they'll play on the aspect that you would eliminate a statement without chasing it, right? So you have to be slightly careful. How to work with such more complex equation, guys, I would suggest for you to look at the video. It will definitely give you a value add. There is also, in that video, there is also a PDF where you can download all the notes for that, as well as questions where I've handwritten solutions to it. You can make use of this and work with it. All right. So that's what I have for today, right? It's been, again, like I said, I really need to thank GMAT Club for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. It's been many years since I've had a discussion with many people in the group. There is an inequalities session that is upcoming on Thursday. It's going to be a long drawn session. I would cater to everything that you require for the inequalities topic, right? So I hope to see you there on Thursday as well. If you want, I can give you 5 minutes for you to ask me any specific doubts. So let me know if you have doubts. All right. Okay, my exam is tomorrow. Any last minute tips for a fellow Ronaldo fan? Rakshit, the simplest tip that I would give, I'll give you 2 tips. Okay, I may sound as a broken record. Like I said, slow down, read the questions. Trust me, slowing down will help you become faster. And second, don't let the all you always try to be in control of the test. Don't let the test control you. So at any point of time, you see that you're running behind time, which may be the case in the DI section, right? If any point of time you see that you're running behind time, don't panic and start rushing through, right? Take stock of the situation and fight the right battles. Okay, I always tell this to all my students before, especially before they go to take their test. Remember, the GMAT is like a war, right? Which has many battles in it. It's not required for you to win all the battles, right? Sometimes it's better to lose a battle and focus on another rather than investing too much of time on some things, right? So if you're not getting a question, don't shy away from letting it go and work on the next. Okay, don't hold on to the fact that okay, this is an easy question, I got it wrong, or this is a hard question. You don't know anything about the difficulty levels. All right. So always look towards winning the war, not winning every battle that you have. All right. Any tips to get better at word problem translations? I used to tend to get lost on wordy word problems. The again, Rafael, I can only give you, a very generic, thing, right? That is, it's always best to read carefully. I tell you what, right? Reading is a very, it's not, it's an underappreciated skill set. Okay, that people don't focus on. Being a quant person, I'm saying that my job is way easier than any verbal tutor because um, I can prove why something is right and why something is wrong. Things are black and white for me. But for a verbal tutor, it's more difficult because it becomes, things go into contextual meaning. So it becomes very important for you to learn how to read and process information. Okay, so when you're working with word problems, right, in addition to just trying to solve the questions, there are 2 things you need to work on. Process the question properly, read it slowly. Start with that, right? Start with reading slowly, trying to understand the intricate meaning of every word that is given. If it takes you 10 minutes, it takes you 10 minutes. But as you develop that process of reading, you'll realize that that becomes a habit, and then you're going to slowly increase speed. Okay, and you'll be able to read quickly and efficiently with efficiency as well. And you'll need that reading skill on the DI section specifically because there's a lot to read on the DI section. All right. NCRT, guys, NCRT for people who need like a brush up of the fundamentals, you can go use NCRT. But I'm more partial. If you're doing that kind of work, you need to build on your basics before you start working with the GMAT. I would recommend looking at Khan Academy videos, right? I mean, I think they explain it in a very bite-sized way, so that would be better. You can also maybe use Manhattan GMAT's Foundations of GMAT Quant. That is also a good, book to have. Got it? RD Sharma. Okay, that is, I think, cat, if I'm not wrong, right? So, guys, don't go to cat level of working. Remember, the skill sets that the GMAT tests you on are a lot different than what is there on cat. Focus on the skill sets of reading, processing, decision making, and reasoning. Okay, obviously the math is the easiest for you to work with, but it's the other skill sets that are, more important. With 2 days to go for another CR7 fan, any tips and tricks to shorten my DI times? Very difficult for me to say that, Kannan, because I'll first need to know where you're losing out of time. So is it the MSR that is creating an issue for you, or are you generally taking too much of time on even the other kinds of questions? Right? MSR and tables, right? So the thing with MSRs, right, and if that's creating an issue, and if you've seen in your practice tests that there is a pattern that you're spending too much of time on the MSRs and you're losing out on the MSRs, then my advice would be to be smart there, right? Use the mark and review feature for the MSR question and try to work with the others. But the risk that you entail is one, because it's an adaptive test, you may get slightly lower questions. But if you're able to attempt all of those questions that comes forward and have a good accuracy, right, you will be able to make up for that. So you can come back and work with the MSR and change the answers to three of the questions. I would recommend using, that for it. 10 minutes for three questions MSR. That's not the ideal time, Kannan. Okay, I think it should be around in the range of 7.5 to 8 minutes. Yeah, Akshay, that's the danger. You're going to be very unlucky if you get two MSRs. You'll have to work with the second MSR. Okay, if you get to that point. Okay, it's very very unlucky if you get two MSRs, because that's six questions, right? But to be very truthful, I feel data sufficiency is the one where you can save time on, because you have around 6 to 8 questions will be data sufficiency related, so you can save a good amount of time there, which you can invest on the graphs and the MSR. Yes, I think Karishma Bansal, if I'm not wrong, did a webinar recently on GMAT Club itself about MSRs. I would suggest for you all to go through that. I think she's a very well respected tutor. I think you'll be benefited by going through that video as well, right? So go through it, please. I think she's. I didn't go through the video myself, but I saw the video. It was related to MSR, so I think you can just go to the GMAT Club channel and look at it. Okay. All right. Okay, guys, looks like most of you will have your tests in a couple of days. For those who have their tests, all the best. Remember, the test doesn't define you, right? Do your best, and hopefully you get to what score you want. All right. I'll see you guys on Thursday. It was great interacting with you. Thank you, and good night.